Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Dr. Geraldine Piorkowski. We'll be discussing her fantastic book, Beyond Pipe Dreams and Platitudes, Insights on Love, Luck, and Narcissism from a Longtime Psychologist. Available for purchase at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And I will say, Dr. Piorkowski was brought to our network today by some of the best movers in the business. Author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through ARP. You can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. And guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Dr. Piorkowski here on the line with us because, listen, her book we're going to be discussing, right off the bat, it is a collection of 8 individual essays. And the essays revolve around common misconceptions that society holds. Now, I am so much looking forward to this because there is one particular essay in there that really piques my interest because I am an avid believer in positive thinking, right? And it's been a big thing for me for so many years. And I've always, now of course, where I think that this is coming from is really kind of that old adage of everything in moderation, right? So I'm really looking forward to that. But listen, guys, again, there are 7 other essay topics. So there is so much more to discover within the confines of her book. Now, we're going to go into some of them. We're going to scratch the surface, but you know what you have to do. If you want to gather all of the information, if you want to learn from all of the things that Dr. Piorkowski has put in her book, you got to go to Amazon and Barnes & Noble. There's no other way around it. And I promise you, you will not be disappointed with the information that you'll receive. And always keep in mind when you're thinking about this, when you're listening to this interview, when you pick up her book and you read it, how can I apply this information to my day-to-day life? And how can I implement this to become a better person, right? And really utilize it and all the benefits that it has. Listen, she's the expert, okay? Literally, she is, because she's a psychologist. So she's pulling from her years of experience. She's created the book. She's going to be able to articulate everything much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's jump right in. First and foremost, Dr. Piorkowski, thank you very much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction. How are you?
I'm just fine, thank you. And you're welcome.
I know we have so much information to cover. Now, before we go into the book specifically and learn a lot of the intricacies that you have within it, start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself, please.
Okay, I actually have had about 55 years of experience dealing with clients of all kinds. I got my PhD way back in 1964, so it's a long time ago. And when I retired about 4 years ago, I said to myself, I had worked with so many different kinds of people. I had worked with the homeless, I had worked with kids, I had worked with judges and lawyers, lots of lawyers, and MDs, all kinds of people from all walks of life, all races, different sexual orientations, etc. And so I asked myself, what did I learn working with all these people for this many years? And the first thing I came up with was that basically all people are fundamentally the same in terms of what they want out of life, in terms of their needs, in terms of their hopes, their dreams, etc. Everybody wants to be loved or appreciated or valued in some way. Everybody wants to feel competent and autonomous, where there's space for themselves. And they want to belong to something or some group of some kind. I remember in terms of the book title comes from this particular gentleman, and he was a PhD in physics, but he was from Thailand, and he was really hung up with his dissertation. And so his chairman, he couldn't finish it. His chairman sent him to me. I was at that time director of the counseling center at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And so he came in, and he was very non-articulate. He was very quiet, but he was crying throughout the entire first interview. And I got him to kind of nod here and there, but I finally asked him whether he was missing his family, because I knew he had a wife and some children in Thailand, and he nodded his head and continued to cry. Well, I saw him the rest of that semester, and I kept wondering what I was doing for this man, because he would come in every week and sit with me for 50 minutes, and mostly what he was doing was crying, not sobbing, but tears were rolling down his cheeks, etc. And I kept saying, I'm not doing anything for this man. I'm not offering any brilliant insights. What's happening? But at the end of the semester, his chairperson called me and said, he finished his dissertation, and I kept trying to figure out what was important for this man. And I think he was very, very lonely, apparently, and missed his family and didn't feel he fit into the American culture. And what those sessions over the course of a semester did for him, I guess, provided a safe haven for him to cry and unburden himself. And I think that's what he was doing. And it worked out well. And I got from him several months later, when he returned to Thailand, a beautiful piece of artwork. And on it was an opium user with a pipe. And so that's how Pipe Dreams got into the title, anyway, beyond Pipe Dreams and Platitudes. We're all basically the same in terms of what we want. Our fears are defensive strategies. We're afraid of being assaulted physically as well as psychologically, in terms of being called names, being humiliated or shamed. When we were kids, we used to say, sticks and bricks will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Well, that's not true. Names hurt a great deal. So I think in terms of what's basically very much the same. In writing the book, then, I did want to look at what are some differences that I learned in terms of what's different in terms of what's out there in the popular culture. And one of the things you mentioned was positive thinking. And I can say about that one, that particular chapter is entitled Positive Thinking Isn't All It's Cracked Up to Be. And what I'm talking about in there is that you really do need to deal with your disappointments and your failures and your upsets in life, what you're concerned about, what you're angry about. And if you don't, I think your feelings, the emotions you felt, if they're buried, they come to haunt you. I remember a college student who came in, a young man, and he was having panic attacks out there on the street, and every time he saw men that resembled his father, he would have this full-fledged panic attack. His father had died 2 years earlier, and when I asked him what he felt at the time of his father's death, he said absolutely nothing. He didn't have a good relationship with him, etc. And but the panic attack started at that moment. So he obviously was unable to deal with a whole host of feelings that he had at the time. So I guess my point about positive thinking is that unless you deal with negative feelings, they will bother you. They'll create symptoms for you. Also, if you're not dealing with signs, like you're sick and you're not going to the doctor, you're going to be in trouble in terms of heart attacks or what have you. So there are lots of things. You can alienate relationships. I also think that people use too many platitudes in terms of dealing with others when they're experiencing disappointments, like we're sorry for your loss. Every time I hear that, I have such a negative reaction because it sounds so perfunctory and meaningless almost. Or he's in a better place when somebody has died. That's another platitude that makes no sense and does more harm than good. Anyway, I've been talking quite a bit about positive thinking. Do you still have some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate what you're talking about. Because again, as I stated when I brought up the whole concept of positive thinking, I have found so much benefit to my life by that. Now, again, as I stated also, everything in moderation, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that I only focus on positivity and completely neglect the negativity in a situation. As you stated, yes, you do have to confront the issues, right? You have to address the negative aspects. And I do believe that, again, this is my positive thing. I think there's a lot to gain from acknowledging the negativity and the negatives in your life as well, right? I think there's always like a silver lining. There's things that you can learn and grow and develop from that. So I absolutely hear what you're saying. I agree. And thank you very much for really for starting there and really focusing on that. I appreciate it. Another chapter that you have in your book that I also really like, and again, I think I can assume the message behind it, but I have you here on the line and I'd love to go a little bit more in depth with it, is you have a chapter called "A Smidgen of Narcissism Adds Joy and Spice to Life." Now,
Right.
Again, I can assume really what you're talking about, but talk to our listening audience about that chapter, please.
Okay. Well, narcissism, our country is filled with unhealthy narcissists. They're wandering all over the place, and these are people who are braggarts, who don't listen very well, etc., who make terrible friends for the most part. So unhealthy narcissism has certainly grandiosity, where the person thinks they're special or better than other people. They have very little empathy, actually. They have a strong need to be admired. There's a sense of entitlement that's involved with unhealthy narcissism, feeling that, they deserve to be the front of the line, to get the best seats, etc. And I think the best example, though, of the unhealthy narcissism is road rage. You can see people in terms of driving along furious at somebody else who cut them off or whatever. And when you think about it, when you're on a busy thoroughfare, there are other people involved. And when we were even in kindergarten or preschool, we learned that you should share or take turns, etc. But those lessons seem to be long forgotten. So there are lots of examples of how this country is sort of populated by many unhealthy narcissists. Mm-hmm. But narcissism, healthy narcissism, is a form of self-love. And what that means actually is to be able to enjoy your accomplishments, whether you're painting your house or fixing a leaky pipe, or you're having a good golf game or fixing a wonderful meal. You should be able to get pleasure out of it, to feel a sense of joy and delight in that. And also with your own appearance. If you look in the mirror and you see yourself and you look good, you can kind of wink at yourself and say, boy, you're looking pretty hot today, or whatever. So to be able to enjoy not only your accomplishments, but the pleasures that your body provides, and that's healthy narcissism. And people confuse those two. I had one patient who came into therapy, and she said, I looked at a video of myself when I was 3 years old, and I was just so upset with it. There I was, hamming in front of the camera. What she was totally unaware of, and this was a quite depressed woman, is that kids do that all the time. They they kind of jump in front of a camera, they want to perform, etc. They take pleasure in what they can do in terms of their physical accomplishments, whether it's walking or riding a bike or what have you. And that's extremely important. Without that healthy narcissism, I think life is very depressing.
Absolutely. Dr. Piorkowski, would it be fair to say that really what we're talking about here, and although it is a very fine line, we're talking about really the duality and comparing and contrasting between confidence and arrogance?
It is a fine line. Well, I think arrogance is when you think, you're better than anybody else. And very often that's a defense against a lot of insecure feelings of inadequacy, etc. Confident is just when you're confident in who you are and you can enjoy yourself, you can enjoy the way you look, you can enjoy your performance, etc. As I said, arrogance becomes something much more damaging in terms of comparing yourself to others and thinking you're much better. I think that's where the line is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Another chapter in your book that I'd love to discuss. When is madness better than sadness? Talk to us a little bit more about that, please.
Okay. I'll tell you where that title came from. There was a catatonic patient. Now, a catatonic person doesn't move. They are really very immobilized. His name was Harold. He was an African-American man, and he had not moved for a period of time, weeks. He was in a psychiatric hospital. But his first words upon recovering were, "Madness is better than sadness." And I was there at the time, and I said, "Harold, what do you mean? Why is madness better than sadness?" He was talking about anger and not, psychosis. And he says, "Well, when you're mad, you can do something, and when you're sad, you can't do anything at all." And so it really started me thinking about the fact that anger does have a place in this world. There's no doubt, even though we've got so much violence out there that's disquieting and disheartening, there's no doubt about that. But for some people, especially the ones who don't get angry very often, anger can be very, very healthy for them. And I think it's, it has to be restrained. It has to be no, swearing at people, shouting at the top of your lungs or calling them names, etc. But being able to express anger is a healthy thing, and very often is the antidote to depression. And when you think about it, anger does communicate information very, very quickly, very swiftly, with a great deal of intensity. Mm-hmm. And when somebody's angry, you're on red alert listening, because it can be dangerous. But so it's a powerful mechanism, and it occurs whenever we're frustrated about our expectations, our entitlements, or what have you. So there's madness can be better than sadness. There's no doubt about it. And as I said, I'm talking about anger, but it has to have limits and restraint. And when you're dealing with a friend or with a partner, for example, I think it's important that you're dealing with somebody who's not a blamer, who doesn't kind of attribute every problem in the relationship to you. Absolutely. In those instances, the recipient of anger often is able to see the error of his or her ways and kind of make changes that will benefit the relationship.
Dr. Piorkowski, this is fantastic, and I appreciate all of the information in which you're giving. And what is so amazing about this is, guys, we've barely scratched the surface. I think we've touched up on maybe 3 of the chapters, and like I said, there's 8 of them in there. There are so many gems to be discovered within this book. Now, as we start to tie up this fantastic interview, let's step away slightly. I'm curious, Dr. Piorkowski, writing this book and going through the journey of getting it published, what would you say was a highlight for you in creating it? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon the journey?
Well, I certainly discovered that I really do love to write. It's a form of self-expression for me that's been very, very important. And from the time I was 16, I won first prize in an essay contest in Chicago. And since then, I have really enjoyed writing. But I think what was surprising to me of the book, in terms of the book, the chapter on luck or chance is, to me, one of the most important ones. That's my favorite chapter. Mm-hmm. Empathy and healthy religion is another one that's a close second. But the one on luck or chance, why I think that's important is that, if you look at the fact that from the day you come into this world, your genes, for example, your parents, your early environment, parental expectations, etc., all of that, you didn't have anything to do with. They were given to you. I mean, right. You were not in control of those factors. And very often people today with social media, they look at themselves in comparison to everybody else, and they think, why aren't I doing as well as Henry or Mary or whatever, forgetting that very often the high achievers come from families where they have a lot of resources, in economic as well as emotional resources. And the low achievers, likewise, often come from families with very, very few resources. And what they're doing often is terrific, given how they started out, whether it's genetically or parental love or what have you. And so, I was trying to think of a metaphor for that chapter. And the one I came up with is card games. I mean, when you play cards, whether it's rummy or whatever, the goal is you play your cards to the best of your ability, and I think that's true in life also. No matter what you were given, I mean, you didn't ask for these things; they were just handed to you. Whatever you were given, make the best of it, and that's where your positive thinking comes in. Because I think what you can do then is you can improve your skills or work on your limitations, but ultimately, if you're not doing as well as John or Mary or somebody else, it really is not your fault. So success is talent, success is hard work, and success is also luck or chance or fate, whatever you want to call it.
I'm going to say it for you one more time to re-impress it, but I know you're already there. I know you've already looked into it because you are just as intrigued as I am. Head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pick up your copy of Beyond Pipe Dreams and Platitudes, Insights on Love, Luck, and Narcissism from a Longtime Psychologist by Dr. Geraldine Piorkowski. You surely will not be disappointed. A fantastic book for you to have on your shelf, but an even better gift for you to get for anybody else. So do yourself a favor and head on over there and pick it up. Dr. Piorkowski, this has been an absolute honor. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
You're quite welcome. I really enjoyed it. You're a good interviewer also. You're a very good one.